You won't believe what I'm about to tell you. Inside a forgotten chapel, buried deep in the Brazilian mountains, I held a rusty scissors in my trembling hands. The same scissors that cut through a woman's eyeball in 1969. 40 witnesses watched as João das Chagas, a simple farmer, sliced into Maria Aparecida's eye without anesthesia. No blood dripped, no scream echoed, just silence. And when he finished, she opened her eyes and read the name on the altar cross. After 12 years of total blindness, the scissors still exists. The witnesses are still alive. And what happened that night defies every law of medicine and reason. But wait until you hear how I found this place. My name is not important. What matters is that I've spent the last 15 years hunting miracles that the world forgot. Miracles that the church buried. Miracles that science cannot explain. And this one haunted me for 3 years before I found it. It started with a whisper. An old woman in a market in Minas Gerais selling herbs and candles. She saw the cross around my neck and leaned close. "You look for the impossible," she said. "Go to São Rafael. But be careful what you find there, São Rafael. A chapel that doesn't exist on any map. A place locals refuse to talk about. When I mentioned the name in the nearest village, doors literally closed in my face. Old men crossed themselves. Women pulled their children inside. Fear, not the fear of evil, but the fear of something too powerful to understand. It took me 8 months to find someone willing to talk. His name was Sebastião, 79 years old, living alone in a house that smelled of wood smoke and old prayers. He had been there. He had seen it. The night Maria Aparecida's eyes were opened. "You want to know about João das Chagas?" he said, pouring cheap cachaça into 2 glasses. He was nobody, a farmer. Never went to school. Couldn't even write his own name. But when that German doctor came through him, he stopped. His hands trembled. When Dr. Fritz came through him, João das Chagas became someone else entirely. Dr. Augusto Fritz, a German military surgeon who died in 1918 during World War I. 51 years later, in 1969, he was performing surgeries in a forgotten Brazilian chapel. Through the body of an illiterate farmer, Sebastião drew me a map, and trembling, he marked the location with an X. 12 kilometers into the forest. Follow the old mule path. You'll know when you're close, because you'll feel it. He was right. I felt it. The road disappeared after 6 kilometers. What remained was barely a path, overgrown, choked with vines, swallowed by the forest. I left my truck behind and continued on foot. The air changed, heavier, thick with moisture and something else. Something watching. The trees here grew different, twisted. Their branches reached toward each other like arthritic fingers trying to block out the sky. The silence was absolute. No birds, no insects. Just my breathing and the sound of my boots crushing. Dead leaves that seemed too dry for a rainforest. Then I saw it, the chapel of São Rafael emerged from the green darkness like a shipwreck, rising from the ocean floor. The white stone walls, once pristine, were now stained black with mold and moss. The red tile roof had collapsed inward, leaving jagged wooden beams exposed like broken ribs. Vines strangled the structure, pulling it slowly back into the earth. But the door was intact. Heavy wood, swollen with humidity, covered in strange scratch marks. Animal, human, I couldn't tell. And above it, carved into the stone lintel, words in Latin, hic manent miracula, here miracles remain. My hand trembled as I pushed the door open. The interior was a cathedral of decay. Sunlight pierced through holes in the roof, creating columns of dusty light that illuminated floating particles, or were they something else? The air smelled of wet stone, rotting wood, and something sweet. Almost like incense, but older, ancient. The wooden pews had rotted into skeletal frames. The walls were covered in faded paintings of saints whose faces had been eaten away by moisture, leaving only their hollow eyes staring at nothing. And there at the far end, the altar. It stood impossibly intact, marble, white, unblemished by the destruction surrounding it. On top of it, a wooden box. locked with a rusted padlock that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. But before I could approach it, I saw them. The stains, 7 circular marks on the stone floor, each one about 6 feet long, 3 feet wide. The exact dimensions of a human body. They were dark, almost black, and no matter how much rain had poured through the broken roof over 40 years, these stains had not faded. I knelt beside one, touched it. The stone was cold, but the stain felt different, smoother, as if something had burned into the rock itself. I scraped at it with my knife. Nothing. It wasn't on the surface. It was the surface, transformed, changed at a molecular level. This was where they had lain. The 23 people who had been operated on by a dead man. Let me tell you how it began. João das Chagas was born in 1923 in a village so small it has since vanished from maps entirely. He grew up farming, married at 19, had 7 children, never learned to read or write. By all accounts, he was unremarkable, a simple man living a simple life until August 15th, 1965. That night, João was sleeping in his small house when he began to scream. His wife, Dona Conceição, found him convulsing on the floor, eyes rolled back, foam at his mouth. She thought he was dying. She called the neighbors. They carried him to the chapel, the only place in the village with electric light, and laid him on a pew. Father Antonio Ferreira, the village priest, administered last rites. João's breathing slowed. His body went rigid. Everyone thought it was over. Then his eyes opened, but they weren't his eyes anymore. "Wo bin ich?" he said. "Where am I?" In perfect German. João das Chagas, who had never left his village, who had never heard a foreign language in his life, was speaking German. His voice was different, deeper, authoritative, with a distinct Prussian accent. He sat up, looked at his hands as if seeing them for the first time, then looked at Father Antonio. "I am Dr. Augusto Fritz," he said, now in Portuguese, but with that same thick German accent. "I have been sent to continue my work. I will need instruments, surgical instruments. Bring me knives, scissors, needles, thread. I will operate." Father Antonio thought he was witnessing demonic possession. He began reciting prayers of exorcism. But João or Fritz simply smiled. "I am not your enemy, Father. I am a doctor, and I have come to heal." 3 days later, the first patient arrived, Manuel dos Santos, 57 years old. A tumor in his abdomen, the size of a grapefruit. The nearest hospital was 300 kilometers away, and he had been told he had 3 months to live. He had nothing to lose. João das Chagas laid him on a wooden table in the chapel's small sacristy. No anesthesia, no sterilization beyond heating the kitchen knife in a candle flame. Father Antonio and 12 villagers watched as João's eyes rolled back, his body stiffened, and that German voice emerged. "Ich werde jetzt operieren," Dr. Fritz announced. "I will now operate." He cut into Manuel's abdomen with steady, precise movements. No hesitation. The incision was clean, professional. Blood flowed, but not excessively. Manuel gasped, but did not scream. His eyes were wide with shock, not pain, but shock. "I can feel pressure," Manuel whispered, "but no pain." "How is there no pain?" Dr. Fritz's hands moved with impossible skill. These were not the calloused, clumsy hands of a farmer. They were the hands of a surgeon with decades of experience. Within 20 minutes he had removed the tumor, placing the grotesque mass in a metal bowl, and sutured the incision with perfect stitches. When it was over, João collapsed. He slept for 14 hours. When he woke, he had no memory of what happened. Father Antonio showed him the tumor in the bowl. João vomited, but Manuel dos Santos. Manuel stood up the next morning, walked 3 kilometers to his field, and worked a full day. 1 week later, the incision had healed completely. 1 month later, he was examined by a doctor in the nearest city. No tumor, no cancer, no scarring except for the thin line across his abdomen. Word spread like wildfire. Over the next 4 years, 22 more people would come to that chapel, each one desperate, each one beyond medical help, and each one would be operated on by a man who shouldn't have been able to do what he did. But it was the 23rd surgery, the last one, that would seal the chapel's fate and force João das Chagas into hiding for the rest of his life. The surgery that 40 people witnessed. The surgery that involved Maria Aparecida's eyes. The surgery with the rusty scissors. Between 1965 and 1969, the Chapel of Saint Raphael became something between a hospital and a pilgrimage site. Patients arrived in the darkness of early morning, guided by faith and desperation. They came from hundreds of kilometers away, some walking for days. Others carried on makeshift stretchers by family members who had sold everything they owned for one last hope. Father Antonio documented everything in leather-bound journals that he kept locked in the sacristy. I found those journals, or rather, they found me. But that's a story for another time. According to his meticulous records, the surgeries became progressively more impossible. The second operation, Dona Josefa, 61 years old. Breast cancer, advanced. The tumor was visible through her skin, a grotesque bulge the size of a child's fist. Dr. Fritz removed it using only a paring knife and sewing needle. No blood transfusion, no antibiotics. She walked out of the chapel 2 hours later. Father Antonio wrote, "I examined the tumor. It was malignant. I know cancer when I see it. But Josefa is alive today, 5 months later, and shows no signs of disease." Now the fifth operation, young Antonio, 17 years old. His appendix had ruptured 3 days earlier. By all medical knowledge, he should have been dead from septic shock. His fever was 41 degrees Celsius. He was delirious, dying. Dr. Fritz opened his abdomen with a razor blade, removed the necrotic appendix with his bare fingers, no gloves, no sterile field, and closed the incision with ordinary cotton thread. Antonio woke up the next morning asking for breakfast. The fever was gone, completely. The ninth operation, Senor Osvaldo, 43 years old. A brain tumor, diagnosed by doctors in São Paulo who gave him 6 weeks to live. Dr. Fritz operated on his brain with a kitchen knife in a chapel lit only by candles. He made an incision through the scalp, used a metal file to create a small opening in the skull, and somehow, impossibly, removed a tumor the size of a walnut. Osvaldo was conscious the entire time. "I felt no pain," he told Father Antonio later. "I felt only peace. Like hands that weren't João's were inside my head, gently removing something that didn't belong there." By the 14th operation, word had spread beyond the village, beyond the region. People came from Minas Gerais, São Paulo, even Rio de Janeiro. The church began to take notice. Bishop Henrique Cardoso arrived in March of 1969. He watched one surgery from beginning to end, a hernia repair on a 50-year-old woman. He saw João enter his trance, heard the German voice, watched the impossible precision of those farmers' hands. Saw the woman stand up minutes after being cut open, smiling, pain-free. The bishop's report to the Vatican was classified, but Father Antonio copied it before sending it. I have it. It reads, in part, "What I witnessed defies theological explanation. If this is demonic, why does it heal? If it is divine, why does it operate outside the sacraments? I'm a man of faith, but I'm afraid of what I saw. Not afraid of evil, but afraid of something beyond our understanding of good and evil, something other." 3 months later, the order came down. Stop immediately. Cease all activities. The church declared the surgeries spiritual interference of uncertain origin and prohibited Father Antonio from allowing them to continue. But how do you stop a miracle? João de Chagas didn't choose when Dr. Fritz came through him. It simply happened, usually at 3 a.m., always in the chapel. The entity seemed bound to that specific place, that specific time. Father Antonio tried locking the chapel. João would sleepwalk there, break the lock, and enter anyway. He tried praying over João. The manifestations continued. He tried exorcism. Dr. Fritz simply waited patiently for the prayers to finish, then proceeded with the surgery. "The doctor is not a demon, Father," João said one morning, after waking with no memory of operating on twins with conjoined intestines the night before. He tells me things. In my dreams. He says he died with work unfinished. That war took him before he could save everyone he was meant to save. He's completing his mission, using me as his hands. Father Antonio wrote, I no longer know what to believe. I have seen the lame walk, the dying live, the impossible made real. But at what cost? João is withering. Each surgery drains him. He has lost 15 kilos. His hair is going white. He's only 46 years old, but looks 70. This gift, or curse, is consuming him. Then, on the night of October 23rd, 1969, Maria Aparecida arrived. She came alone. No family, no escort. A blind woman who had walked 12 kilometers through the forest, guided only by faith and the stories she had heard. How she found the path she never explained. I just knew where to go, she said. 40 people were in the chapel that night. It was more than usual. Word had spread that the church was shutting everything down. This might be the last surgery. People wanted to witness history before it ended. Maria entered just after midnight. She wore a simple dress, faded blue, patched at the elbows. Her eyes were clouded white with cataracts, thick, milky, completely opaque. She had been blind for 12 years. 12 years of darkness. 12 years of praying for a miracle that doctors said was impossible. Cataracts that advanced required surgery with microscopes, specialized instruments, sterile operating rooms. Not a kitchen scissors in a candlelit chapel, but she had faith. João das Chagas was already in his trance when she arrived. Sitting rigid on a wooden chair near the altar, eyes rolled back, breathing shallow. Father Antonio had tried to send everyone home, to prevent what he knew was coming. But no one left. They sensed something. Tonight was different. Dr. Fritz's voice emerged from João's throat. That German accent, thickened with authority and something else. Urgency? Bring her to me, he commanded. They led Maria to the altar. The wooden bench had been prepared, cleaned, covered with a white sheet that had been boiled. Primitive, but it was all they had. Maria lay down without hesitation. Without fear. I am ready, she whispered. João's body stood. His movements were fluid now, controlled, nothing like the clumsy farmer everyone knew. His hands reached for the wooden box on the altar, the box that contained his instruments. He opened it slowly, reverently. Inside, 3 kitchen knives of varying sizes, a pair of household scissors with rust spots near the handles, sewing needles, cotton thread, and a small bottle of alcohol for cleaning wounds afterward. Not for sterilization. Dr. Fritz never sterilized anything beforehand. The spirit realm has no bacteria, he had said once. He selected the scissors, held them up to the candlelight. The rust caught the flame, glinting orange and red. 40 people held their breath. Father Antonio clutched his rosary so tightly his knuckles went white. He wanted to stop this, wanted to physically prevent what was about to happen. But he was paralyzed. By fear, by faith, by the terrible knowledge that he was about to witness something that would haunt him forever. Dr. Fritz leaned over Maria Aparecida's face. His João's hands moved to her right eye, the clouded dead eye that hadn't seen light in over a decade. Do not be afraid, he said gently. You will see again, and then... He cut. What happened next? What 40 people witnessed in that chapel on October 23rd, 1969, is why the church sealed this place, why João das Chagas disappeared, why Maria Aparecida never spoke publicly about that night, and why the scissors, that rusty, impossible instrument, still exists, still holds the memory of what it touched, still carries the weight of a miracle that should not have been possible. Not pressed, not stabbed, touched, gently, as if testing the surface of still water. Maria Aparecida's body remained completely relaxed, no flinch, no instinctive pull away, just acceptance. Then Dr. Fritz, speaking through João's voice, began to cut. I need you to understand something. I have interviewed 7 of the 40 witnesses who were in that chapel. All of them, now in their 70s and 80s, remember every detail with crystalline clarity. And all of them describe the same impossible phenomenon. The scissors cut through the clouded tissue of her eyeball. But there was no blood, not a drop, not a trickle, nothing. Senor Sebastião, who I spoke with, was standing less than 3 feet away. I watched the blades separate the cataract from her eye, he told me, his hands still shaking 54 years later. I saw the tissue part, but it was like cutting through fog. The scissors moved through her eye, as if there was no physical substance there. Only light, only something I don't have words for. Donna Lourdes, 81 years old now, was holding Maria's hand. She squeezed my fingers once, not from pain, but from anticipation, like she knew something beautiful was about to happen. Her breathing never changed, slow, steady, peaceful. I've given birth to 4 children. I know what pain looks like on a woman's face. This wasn't pain. Dr. Fritz worked with methodical precision. The rusty scissors, which by all logic should have caused catastrophic infection, moved through the clouded cataract tissue as if guided by invisible hands, which, according to witnesses, they were. Father Antonio wrote in his journal that night, "I saw 4 hands, not 2. Joane's physical hands held the scissors, but there were other hands, translucent, shimmering like heat waves, guiding his movements. Hands that seemed to reach through Joane from somewhere else, somewhere beyond. 3 minutes, that's how long it took. 3 minutes to remove cataracts that would have required hours in a modern surgical suite. When Dr. Fritz finally pulled the scissors away, he held them up to the candlelight. On the blades, barely visible, was a thin, milky film, the extracted cataract. He wiped it carefully onto a white cloth, then set the scissors down on the altar. "It is done," he said in that thick German accent. "She will see." Joane's body swayed, stumbled. 2 men caught him before he fell. His eyes, rolled back this entire time, suddenly returned to normal position. He blinked, confused, disoriented. What happened?" he mumbled in his own voice. The trance was breaking, but no one was looking at João anymore. Everyone was looking at Maria. Her eyes were closed, still closed. The tissue where the scissors had entered showed no wound, no incision, no mark whatsoever. As if nothing had touched her at all, the chapel was absolutely silent. 40 people holding their breath. Father Antonio gripping his rosary, Donna Lourdes still holding Maria's hand. Even João, barely conscious, stared at the woman on the bench. "Open your eyes, child," Father Antonio whispered. "Open your eyes." Maria's eyelids fluttered once, twice, and then they opened. The clouded white was gone, completely. Her eyes were clear, brown, deep brown like rich earth, clear like mountain water. The cataracts that had stolen her vision for 12 years had simply vanished. But Maria didn't move. She lay there, eyes open, staring straight up at the ceiling of the chapel, at the holes where rain poured through, at the rafters covered in moss, at the stone and wood and decay. Tears began streaming down her face, not sad tears, not painful tears. "I can see the light," she whispered. "Oh God, I can see the light." She sat up slowly, as if afraid any sudden movement would shatter the miracle. Her hands reached toward the candles burning on the altar. She stared at the flames, like a child seeing fire for the first time. Then she turned her head. She looked at Donna Lourdes, at Señor Sebastián, at Father Antonio with his white collar and shocked expression, at the 40 faces surrounding her, faces she had never seen, people she had known only by voice and touch. "You're beautiful," she said to Donna Lourdes. "I always imagined you with a kind face. And you are. You're so beautiful." Donna Lourdes collapsed into sobs. Maria stood from the bench, steady, confident. She walked, not stumbled, walked toward the altar, toward the wooden cross that stood above it. A simple cross, carved from local wood, nothing elaborate. She read the inscription carved into its base. Out loud, "Em memória do Padre José, 1847, in memory of Father José, 1847, the chapel erupted, not in celebration, not yet, in shock, in awe, in the terrible, overwhelming realization that they had just witnessed something that shouldn't exist, something that violated every law of medicine, physics, biology. Something that proved, undeniably, irrefutably, that there are forces in this universe beyond human comprehension. Some people fell to their knees, praying. Others ran outside, overwhelmed, needing air. Several people vomited from the sheer emotional intensity. Father Antonio stood frozen, rosary dangling from his trembling hands, whispering the same phrase over and over. Forgive me for doubting. João das Chagas collapsed completely. They carried him to the sacristy, where he slept for 18 hours. When he finally woke, he had no memory of the surgery, no memory of Dr. Fritz, no memory of cutting into Maria's eye, but his hands. His hands were different. The calluses were gone, completely. His palms were smooth, soft, like the hands of someone who had never worked a day in their life. Like the hands of a surgeon. They returned to their rough farmer's texture over the next 3 days. But for 72 hours, João das Chagas had the hands of Dr. Augusto Fritz. Maria Aparecida stayed in the village for 1 week. During that time, she was examined by Dr. Henrique Costa, the nearest physician who traveled from the city specifically to document what had happened. His report, which I have a copy of, states, patient presence with completely clear corneas. No scarring, no surgical marks of any kind. Visual acuity tested at 20/20 in both eyes. No medical explanation for recovery from cataracts of this severity. Previous diagnosis confirmed by ophthalmologist in São Paulo. Current condition, impossible. On the 8th day, Maria disappeared. She left before dawn, telling no one where she was going. Some say she joined a convent. Others claim she went into the deep forest to live as a hermit, afraid that speaking about the miracle would somehow undo it. A few believe she was taken by the church, hidden away to prevent her story from spreading. No one knows for certain, but what we do know, what can never be disputed, is that 40 people witnessed the impossible that night. 40 people who signed a testimony document that Father Antonio kept locked in his safe. 40 people who, until their deaths, never changed their story, and we know that the scissors still exists. 3 months after Maria's surgery, the church sent officials to the chapel of São Rafael. They seized all of João's instruments. They interrogated Father Antonio for 6 hours. They threatened him with excommunication if he ever spoke publicly about the surgeries, and they ordered the chapel closed permanently. Father Antonio died in a car accident 2 weeks later. The official report said brake failure, but locals whispered about other things, convenient things, silenced things. João das Chagas fled into the mountains. He lived in hiding for the next 22 years, moving from village to village, never staying anywhere long enough to be found. Dr. Fritz never manifested again, not once. Whatever door had opened in 1965 had closed in 1969. João died in 1991, alone, in a shack without electricity. His last words, spoken to a neighbor who found him, "Tell them I'm sorry. I didn't understand what I was. I didn't understand what I carried. The chapel was abandoned, forgotten, swallowed by the forest, until I found it. I stood in that ruined chapel for 3 hours, just standing there, staring at the wooden box on the altar, the box containing the scissors, the instrument that had touched the impossible. Father Antonio's journals said no one should touch them without permission. But permission from whom? Everyone involved was dead. The church had buried the story. God, if he was listening, wasn't offering guidance. I opened the box. The scissors lay on a bed of rotted velvet, rust spreading across the blades like dried blood. They were heavier than I expected, cold, not just metal cold, but something deeper, like holding a piece of frozen time. My hands trembled as I lifted them, turned them in the light, filtering through the broken roof. On the blades, barely visible, were microscopic scratches, patterns, too precise to be random wear, almost like writing. A language I didn't recognize. I held them for maybe 30 seconds. Then carefully, reverently placed them back in the box and closed the lid. 3 days later, I woke up blind, not fully blind, not like Maria had been, but my right eye, just my right eye, was covered in a thick white fog. I couldn't see shapes, couldn't see light, just whiteness, dense, impenetrable. I drove 6 hours to São Paulo, saw the best ophthalmologist in Brazil. He examined me for 2 hours, ran every test, found nothing. No cataract, No infection, no physical explanation whatsoever. Your eye is perfectly healthy, he said, confused. But somehow, it's not seeing. On the fourth morning, I woke up and the fog was gone. Completely, my vision was perfect. Better than perfect, actually. I could see details I'd never noticed before. The individual fibers in fabric, the microscopic texture of paper. Things most people can't perceive. The doctor had no explanation. I didn't tell him about the scissors, about the chapel, about what I touched, but I understood the message. Some things are not meant to be grasped by human hands. Some miracles carry a price, not of money or pain, but of understanding. A reminder that we are not in control, that there are forces, entities, realities beyond our comprehension. And when we touch them even briefly, they touch us back. So what do we make of Joan das Chagas, of Dr. Fritz, of Maria Aparecida, and the 23 surgeries that should not have been possible? Science has no answer. The church has no answer. Medicine has no answer, but maybe that's the point. Maybe miracles aren't meant to be explained. Maybe they're meant to be experienced, witnessed, carried in our hearts as proof that this world, this material, logical, rational world, is not all there is. Faith isn't about understanding. It's about accepting that some doors open into rooms we cannot see. Some hands reach through from places we cannot name. Some healings occur through methods we cannot replicate. And sometimes, in forgotten chapels buried in mountains no map remembers, the impossible becomes real. The chapel of San Rafael still stands, barely. Another decade, and the forest will swallow it completely. The box with the scissors remains on the altar. How long before moisture destroys them? Before rust consumes the last evidence of what happened there? I'm telling you this story now because soon there will be no physical proof left. Only testimonies, only memories, only faith. And maybe that's how it should be, because the greatest miracles aren't the ones we can touch, photograph, or preserve in museums. The greatest miracles are the ones that live in our hearts, the ones that change us, the ones that whisper, "There is more. There is always more." Keep searching. Keep believing. Keep your eyes open for the impossible. I've spent 15 years hunting forgotten miracles, and I've learned one undeniable truth. They exist. Not in the way we expect, not with the explanations we demand, but they exist, and they're waiting to be found. Next time, I'll take you to a chapel in the Amazon, where a statue of Mary cries real tears. Tears that have been scientifically tested, tears that are human. But the statue has no body, no source, no explanation. Or maybe you'd rather hear about the monastery where monks have been chanting the same prayer for 400 years. And the prayer keeps the forest from advancing. The day they stop chanting, witnesses claim the trees move closer. Always closer. These stories exist. These places exist. These miracles are real, but they won't be real for long. Time erases everything. Forests reclaim. Witnesses die. Stories fade. Unless we remember them, unless we share them, unless we believe. If this story moved you, if it made you question what's possible, then share it. Tell someone. Keep the miracle alive. Because every forgotten chapel, every buried testimony, every silenced witness, they're all counting on us to remember, to believe in the invisible, to have faith that anything is possible. Subscribe to this channel. Join me as I uncover more miracles the world forgot. More impossible stories that actually happened. More proof that we live in a universe far stranger and more beautiful than we've been told. The scissors are still in that chapel, still waiting, still carrying the memory of the night Maria Aparecida saw light for the first time in 12 years. And somewhere out there, another miracle is waiting to be discovered. Will you help me find it?